Welcome to the Global Wellness HQ family of podcasts. We are your international headquarters for resources and ideas and insight in relation to the 9 elements of holistic wellness. Join us as we interview local and international wellness experts and learn how you can implement and improve one element or dimension of wellness at a time. Our experts will share their practical tips on wellness in one of these core areas: emotional, intellectual, occupational, physical, environmental, financial, spiritual, social, or habitual. We created our family of podcasts as a resource for anyone who is looking to integrate the 9 elements of holistic wellness into their daily lives. Welcome to the show.
Hi, everyone. I'm excited today. I have my new friend, Sherrika Sanders, with me. Sherrika, welcome to the show. Could you please introduce yourself and tell my viewers who you are and what you do?
Well, thank you so much for having me, first of all. So, yes, I am Sherrika Sanders. I was a corporate accountant for the last 15 years, and I made the huge leap of faith earlier this year to start Transform the Gap. So, what is Transform the Gap? Transform the Gap, when that's GAAP to my accountants out there. I wanted to give a nod to my accountants, so I wanted to make sure my name included something relatable. So Transform the Gap is a company I started where I go back to the organizations that I work with and help those employees. So that's the privately held and the private equity businesses. And I want to help their accounting employees. Why? Because when I was in corporate America and going through acquisitions, mergers, reverse mergers, divestitures, bank in and out of bankruptcy. Like, I've gone through all of these things and taking employees through all of these things. And these businesses are typically trying to get to that next level. They're trying to, be sold or buy another company or, go through an IPO. And they have all of these lender requirements, these bank requirements, and as well as the cash infusions. But when that cash comes in, it goes to sales and marketing or IT development, and accounting gets ignored. Why? Because it's a non-revenue generating position. It's not bringing any money in the business, so the business isn't willing to put a lot of money towards the accounting team. However, the accounting team still has the bank requirements, the lender requirements, and honestly still pushed to sacrifice their work-life balance, mental health, whatever you want to call it, to meet those deadlines. And so I go into these organizations and I work with their accounting employees. And I'm like, okay, how can we streamline your processes? How can we make what you're doing more efficient? Are you doing something manually that really should be automated? Is this ERP antiquated? Are your processes not documented? And they should be, but even more so on the personal level of, we need to work on your communication. We need to work on your time management. It's not what you're doing, it's how you're doing it. So really working with those employees so they don't continue to feel like they've been forgotten. And they're the redheaded stepchildren, as the saying goes. Sorry for you, red. But so, I really want to help. I did that. That's what I did during my whole time. I was always honestly working with some sort of project and always leading my team through some sort of, the next big thing. But I really enjoyed it. And, I would always get how they really appreciated having someone in their corner. And that's what I want to be able to do for other teams.
I love that. And I think I want to pull back a couple of things, and in particular, that notion that the accounting department is often overlooked. I think, and I love the name of your business, by the way. I think that's a nice play on words, and it took me a second or two, and then I went, oh, and my immediate reaction is clearly she's one of us. But I think it's fascinating. So I've seen many, many, many projects where the accounting department is being ground into the dirt because we got to meet deadlines.
Yes.
And as you said, they're not revenue producing. So therefore, why should we waste things like budget on the
Yeah,
accounting department?
yeah, yeah. Accounting is asked to look at the expenses. And that's another thing that I'll sit down with the team and look at the operating expenses to see, like, are we really categorizing things correctly? Because we may be taking a hit to our net income. We really don't have to. So are we categorizing things correctly? Are there accruals that may be missing that we should be doing? But really wanting to make sure that the accountant themselves is presenting their best self, because I think that'll make them feel a little bit better about their work. But also knowing that the organization decided to invest some time into what they're doing, into their development, will, make them see, okay, well, how can I grow with this company? What else can I give to this company? Because I always tell people, like, I I've never had anyone on my team that I couldn't work with. We may have started with a couple of challenges, but we were able to overcome them. And honestly, I can't speak of anyone that I've ever had on any of my teams who wasn't willing to go above and beyond to help out. And they always said, well, I know they knew that I had their back. And so when people know that you have their back, when they know that you're interested in their, best interests, they'll they'll do whatever it takes. They'll go the extra mile. And it's not because they have to, it's because they want to. And so, I definitely want to make sure that I'm the voice of the accountants.
I think the big thing is, making sure the accountants, number one, know they have a voice, but number two, knowing how to use that voice. Now,
Yeah.
this is a slight tangent, but I'm sure you'll indulge me. I see the sign behind you that says, I am uniquely me and authentically free. I own my power.
Yes.
Tell me about that sign and what it means to you, because unique and authentic are two of my favorite words.
Oh, yeah. I'm talking to the right person. So I honestly, there was a point for me. I progressed quite well within my years in accounting, and it got to a point where I would be the only one, honestly, that looked like me in the room. Sometimes there were other females, but being a Black woman, I was the only one that looked like me in the room. And sometimes you would have, and not everybody, did this, but and some would say, okay, well, let's make Sherrika feel more comfortable. So let's talk about things that Sherrika can relate to, like rap music. Well, I don't listen to rap music. So you're not appealing to me. And when I first started to go into these rooms, into these boardrooms, and I was like, oh my gosh, let me just sit here and soak it all in and make sure they understand that I'm supposed to be here. But what this behind me says is, well, you're already at the table. You've already done what it takes to be there. And so be confident in that and stand in that, and don't be afraid to use your voice, like, oh, if I say something, they'll see that I'm here, and ask me to leave, kind of thing. And so that's honestly what it is, just being confident in you, being confident in your ability to speak up. You have some people who, you may have an accountant who has a great idea, but, oh, my manager's not available and I don't feel comfortable talking to the CFO. Like, they're human, they're a person. If you have an idea, they're right there, share it. And so it's really just trying to help others, or me telling others, and hopefully being able to help others know that it's okay to be you.
And I think it's fair to say that your voice needs to be heard. I heard somebody once explain it as, life is like a buffet. And if somebody doesn't, or sorry, like a potluck, and if somebody doesn't bring their unique self, their dish to the table, somebody might not get to be fed because that person didn't show up. So I love that voice. Now, you and I are going to talk about a few things, but let's start with, how does somebody work with you? What kind of things are you doing, and who's having these conversations with you?
Awesome. So typically it's the CFO or the decision makers within the accounting team. It could also be HR because HR knows generally, how to find an accounting employee, but they aren't familiar with the specifics. They don't understand the day to day. And so I'll also work with the HR teams. They may bring me in and say, hey, we're having an issue with either whether it's the morale or just, our CFO is complaining that he's not really getting the results he needs, and we're trying to figure something else out before we make some adjustments to the team. So it's generally with, those decision makers. I'll come into the organization, sit with typically the team that's involved with the close and seeing what their process is and seeing where the gaps are and where we can kind of make some adjustments, especially if one of the big issues, and it often is closing in a timely fashion. 28 days, 30 days is probably not ideal. And that's what I've seen often. So trying to, narrow that down and get it into a much cleaner fashion, a much cleaner fashion. And so it's HR within those organizations. So when I go in and also have that time with their processes, I will sit down with those employees. And typically I ask them to select 5 employees, for additional coaching. And that could be either in a group setting or it can be one-on-one. And I have some ideal topics that I'll, work with, finding the work-life balance and being able to speak up and making sure you're working smart and not hard. Or if there's specific things that they want the person to focus on. So they may have a person who, she's a great employee.
You can hear me be froze.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Did I go? Did I leave?
You froze at we might have a great employee, she. So I'm sure you said something brilliant. So just repeat that if you could. And
yeah, sorry. But yeah, we have a great employee. She works well with the team. She meets all of her deadlines, provides great work, and we're looking to develop her, but she's shy. She kind of, stays in the background. We don't really hear her voice or really speak up like we know she can. And so I can work with those employees to help develop them because they may not even realize that the company has that interest in them or is seeing them that way. So definitely there. But I also offer one-on-one services with the accountant themselves. Let's say, there's an accountant I'm really looking to grow in my career. I'm not really sure which way I want to navigate that, whether I want to stay in accounting, gear a little bit more towards finance. How do I best market myself within my company? How do I make sure that I'm being seen properly? And so I'll provide those one-on-one services to the accountants as well. You can consider me like a career advancement coach for accountants.
love that. And honestly, you're literally the first person I've heard describe themselves as that. And I think there's a misconception amongst accountants that, just show up, do the work, and the most qualified person gets promoted. What would you say to that comment?
That's not true at all, honestly. And so prime example, I started with an organization. Me and one other lady started the same time as senior revenue accountants. We started with the company. At the time that we interviewed, there was another person already in the position. He was leaving out, but he would be leaving after we started, so we would have time to train. Well, that didn't happen. We showed up on day one, he was already gone. And so they're like, well, we have a few things that we were kind of able to document before you got here, but not everything. But the things we do have are in this folder, and we're in the middle of close. Good luck. And so it was like, oh, okay, all right, well, I guess we need to figure this out. And she and I did work together quite well to figure it out. But I guess I think it may have been my perspective, my attitude that helped, because it was, yep, he's not here. No need to sit and cry over spilled milk. Let's figure out what we need to do and keep it moving. And she was upset and like, I don't know why they're doing this, and this doesn't make sense to me. And the funny thing is, and I don't know if she ever even knew this, but I was honestly a little intimidated by her because I felt like she had so much more experience than I did. And so I'm like, well, I need to make sure that I show up because this lady is gonna just outshine me. And so we took the work, and I'm like, okay, we need to figure this out. Here are all the tasks that need to happen. Let's split it up. What do you want to take? I'll take the rest. And so we can get it done. And, it was doing, and she joked like, okay, boss, and I'm like, well, we just have to do it. So, but let's see, about 6 months later, there was a major layoff in the organization, and she was let go. And they told me, I didn't even realize it happened because we didn't sit right next to each other. I just know that our controller came by me and he's like, everything's okay. You and I will talk later. And I'm like, oh, is that, I don't know what that means. Like,
What's
am I
that
next?
code for?
Right.
Is there a later? Should I pack my desk up?
Exactly. And so he pulled me to the side a little bit later and he said, yeah, we had to let her go, that, we just really enjoy working with you. We really enjoy how you've stepped up since you've been here, and, all these other things. And not only that, a month later, I was promoted. So, and I was actually given the responsibility of US and Canada. And so of managing those employees as well. And I'm like, it had nothing to do with my ability. I could do accounting, yes, but it was how I handled the situation that we were put in. And so that plays a lot. And honestly, it's the same thing I would look at for my teams. When I had my teams and developing my employees, it wasn't about where they are right now. It wasn't about, their level of education. It was about what type of work ethic do you have? Are you a person that others can work with well? Do you ask questions when you don't know? Do you try to find out the answer when you don't know instead of just, I'm not sure, and kind of brushing it off,
Somebody else will fix it.
Right, exactly. So it's when they say it's skill set is something that can be taught.
Yeah.
But you can't teach personality. You can't teach, I can't make you want something. So it's those, what they call soft skills, that people have that really allows them to be pushed forward and continue to grow and develop. So no, I don't think it's about the work you can do at all, because you can have all the knowledge, and if people can't get along with you, they're not going to promote you. Yeah.
And I just like to say, back in my days, I chose accounting because I thought it was a profession where people just leave me alone and I just had to deal with numbers. And I've learned a lot since then that, that they lie on the recruiting brochures. Your people skills are important. So I want to thank you for sharing that, because I think a lot of people just sit back and they hope for the best. Now you talk a lot about processes, and you have no way of knowing this, but that's one of my favorite conversations. I actually, it's funny because when I was in high school, I worked at McDonald's, and the franchise owner was a crazy person in my world, because he kept, every day he'd show up just whistling, and he was a happy guy. He'd be like, Jeff, you're getting the best business education ever. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? I'm flipping burgers. I'm cleaning bathrooms. I'm flipping burgers. I'm sweeping. I'm mopping. I'm cleaning out the grease traps. I'm like, where's the business education? And now I look back and go, it's the magic of having a group of teenagers literally who have keys to $1 million restaurant, and they can run it because, and across the country, across the globe. How important do you think processes are to the accounting department?
Very much so. You tend to have the employee who feels like this is my process, this is what I do. They're not really willing to share it because they think it's this false sense of job security. But what it does, and one of the things I like to address with companies is it's a single point of failure. If something happens beyond their control and they're not able to show up, what do you do? And you're scrambling, you're trying to figure it out, and you shouldn't have to do that. You should already have processes documented, and they should be checked ever so often at least, just to make sure they're up to date. Because it doesn't have you're like, oh yeah, we're all of our processes are documented, and it's like, oh okay, when 5 years ago? What?
Yeah.
There's so many issues there. One, why haven't they changed in 5 years? If that's the case, that's a problem in itself.
Because
Um,
nothing's changed in the last 5 years, right?
yeah, yeah, that's like exactly. So like that in itself is a problem. But typically something has changed, but you haven't taken the time to update it, to process it. Or when you have the person who's been in the same position for 15 years doing the exact same thing, the exact same way, and it probably should have changed, but they're like, well, this is what works for me, but what works for the organization? What's working for you is having us 3 days late on our deadline. So what's working for the organization? So yes, I'm all about cross training, about process improvement, process documentation. I was an AR manager once, and when I came into the organization, it was with a real estate default firm. So I've been in a few different industries. And so, as the AR manager, I'm meeting the team. And so basically what real estate default is the firm represents the banks in foreclosures. So basically we work for, I guess you'd say, the bad guys. But what the AR team was split, and they're like, well, we handle the responses for this bank, and we handle the responses for this bank, and then this group over here that's something completely different. And I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I like, one of the things when I go in, I like to sit with each person and find out what they do. And so as I'm talking to them and learning what they do, and I'm like, oh, what about, this person said that his process is X. And they're like, well, I don't know about that. I only know this one thing. And I found like that was consistent with the team. They only knew that one thing for the one, bank or whatever that they worked with. And so after, I don't know, it wasn't long, maybe a couple of weeks, we had a team meeting, and I'm like, all right, so we're going to switch it up. Everybody's going to do something different. And they're like, well, we don't know. And of course, no process or document. And they're like, well, we don't know what to do. And how? And I'm like, well, we understand the basics. We understand the foundation. I'm going to let you all spend a little bit of time with them introducing you how to do these things, but we all sit right here together. If there are questions that we don't understand, we can, bounce it off each other as we work. And so I had them spend a little time doing training together. And then I switched it up. Everybody had to do something that they didn't know how to do. And they did not like me for it. They did not like it at all. They were not happy. But best believe it was probably even the next month, they were like, I'm so glad that you did that. I didn't know. And now I can take this and, that I learned with this system, and I can actually incorporate it in our process over here. Or, now I know something more than just this one thing. And it's something else I can put on my resume. Like, they all appreciated the end result. Now, initially, no one was it. They all were like, where did she come from? Where did you all find this lady? But it works.
And I think that's a funny thing when accountants resist processes because, well, this is the way I do it. You don't understand, it's unique because I'm a firm believer that if you don't have a process for something, and I'm going to pick on the accounting profession, I can say this because I'm in recovery as a recovering accountant. We know how to build spreadsheets, so we don't see the problem that, in my opinion, a spreadsheet represents a gap somewhere. We're missing something, or we're trying to fix something. And one of my little things I've observed in myself and other accountants is because we can create spreadsheets, we do. And then we expect someone else to come along and pick it up and go, oh yeah, makes perfect sense. But
Right.
if they don't have the process, so one of the things I always say is you should have processes for the most important, the most mission critical. And one of the symptoms is we're not meeting deadlines. If we're not on deadline, or if we're struggling to meet deadline, it's not, hey, can we move the deadline back? It's what should we be doing to get there? And I always found month end fascinating because month end happens every month. I mean, by definition, we know it's happening. And yet there are people I've worked with who are like, oh my God, it's month end.
Yes.
And I'm like, so I've been up to date all month. And again, I've done my work. And yes, it's month end. Okay, I'll chip in and I'll help you. And then as soon as month end is done, they're like, whew, got another 30 days. It's like, no, no, no.
You're
So
just prepping for the next month in.
yeah, and honestly, I mean, the part that fascinates me is when people act surprised that, oh, I need to run this report. It's like, what are you, new? So what would you say to somebody? Because I know how I answer this, but I want to hear your thoughts. Somebody who says, I don't have time for processes, or processes won't help me. This is your chance to rant.
Oh, I've heard that. Honestly, and I'm sorry, feel like I have to store up everything, but in 15 years, I guess a little bit.
Yeah.
But one of my last position, honestly, before I left corporate, again, my same process. When I go into an organization, I want to sit with each person and find out what they do. And I remember saying to one of the employees, hey, I want to sit down, kind of go over what you do, one, so I can understand it, but also, with another set of eyes looking in, you never know where there could be gaps, or maybe we can make some things more efficient. And so they were really opposed to it. I mean, they had to do it, but they were really opposed to it. Like, I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for a while. I don't need any additional feedback. This is the fastest way to do it. If it were a different way, then I would be doing it. I would know. And it was like, oh, okay. Well, humor me. And so, we go through the processes. And of course, there are things that can be changed. There are things that can be adjusted. But it's because you've been looking at it consistently, and it's only your feedback that you've gotten on how to do this process, why you believe that it's being done the best way that it can be. And that's not right. And so you should always want that additional feedback, want that extra guidance. One of the ways that I found that we were able to meet our deadline the best way, honestly, is when we were forced. When it was, hey, we have to get the revenue over to the board by day 2. And it was, but the process doesn't work like that. We normally don't get the reports to them. We normally don't. We have to get the revenue to the board by day 2. So if we need to work backwards, let's work backwards and see where we can make those adjustments. Do we need to tell other people that maybe we need to put in a cutoff? Do we need to, whoever, if we're reaching out to someone else outside of our group, let's alert them and kind of get some deadlines in place, have a conversation, so that when the time comes, everybody's on the same page and we can get this ball rolling, and we're not trying to still just now kick off something that's already due. So that's generally, what it takes. Putting those hard deadlines in place and then working backwards to say, okay, where can we make these changes? Because if you give 9 times out of 10, if you give the employee the option to say, hey, where can we make this more efficient? They're like, well, nope, it's already as best as it's going to be. And sometimes it even takes giving it to somebody else, letting somebody else take it and seeing it and showing them the process. And now not only have you cross-trained an additional employee, but they also like, okay, now that I understand this, why aren't we doing X? And you're like, I don't know. Why aren't we doing it? So yep. I've definitely had those challenges, and one small thing that I think makes a big difference is also a closed calendar. Like just saying, hey, we need to be done by the 5th business day. that doesn't really work. You need something that everybody can look at, that we can keep up with the progress of what's happening, what's going on. And so we have milestones that are right in front of us that we can say, oh, wait, okay, tomorrow is day 2 and these things are due. So let me go ahead. What do I need to prep for today to make sure that happens? So I think a closed calendar is one thing that I really don't see a lot of. And it's something that's really small that can go a long way.
I love it because this is the one exception where I say you should have a spreadsheet. Um, because I used to do that, and it's such a silly little thing. But when I'd go into a new accounting department or I'd go in and work with a new client, first thing I would say is, okay, let's treat this like a project that we're going to manage. And we'd say, okay, who are the players and what's the sequence? And, it was usually it was little things, but, mapping it out on a whiteboard. And we find out that this one person can't do anything until they get input from somebody else. And everybody was leaving that to chance. And, when the one person wasn't asking for it, nobody thought about it. But then when we put it in the project, everybody could see, and again, I know accountants can do this, but simple, understanding the dependencies and, cross-training people so that, person A who passes the report to person B, who then does something with it and passes it to C, they should all know how that process flows. And more importantly, why is so-and-so so slow with this every month? What's the effort that goes into it? And, my favorite question is, why are we waiting till month end to do all the other things?
Yes.
We know how much bank charges are. Why aren't we posting that? It's just the little things, right? Like, I used to reconcile the bank daily, and it was just okay. So you and I are kindred spirits. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about working with you. So we've talked about the kind of employer or the person who would reach out to you.
Yes.
What are some of the symptoms? How would somebody in HR, because I'm going to be honest with you, my view of HR is they tend to be the last one to know about things. And, a lot of times, and no offense to the HR people, but they're the ones who are there to prevent the company from getting sued when they fire somebody. They're more about reacting than they are about planning.
Very true.
But what are some of the things, sorry, grammar's not my specialty today. What are some of the things the HR people are hearing where they should be like, oh my God, drop everything, let's get Sherrika in today?
Honestly, it's when you see the demeanor of an employee has changed. The employee, the accountant that would normally come in and say good morning every morning, and now you all don't get in at the same time, and you come in and they're already there, head down, hey, and just, but it's consistent. It's not just this is a one day or ever so often, like it's consistently happening, or they're already frustrated. Or sometimes you'll even hear the CFO complaining, like, oh gosh, this isn't happening, that isn't happening. And probably even going to HR about the employee, like, what are my steps? What is it that I need to do because this employee isn't working? And that's when I think they should interject and say, okay, wait a minute. I've seen, these particular signs from the employee, and now you're saying this. Let's see if something else is wrong. So I think for HR, it's definitely that. If you're the CFO or the decision maker, or even the accounting manager who needs to talk to the CFO, and your team is struggling, you're struggling to meet deadlines, you're struggling to get along, which happens a lot when there's been some sort of merger or acquisition. And one team wants to, well, this is how we did things, or this is how we used to do things. So when you have those type of organizational changes going, you typically want to bring in a third party, an objective party, to where you can talk about how you align the department the best way, how you make sure that each employee feels heard and that you can find the best processes within what each person is doing. And so it's through those organizational changes that the accounting decision makers would bring me in. It's through if you're seeing an issue with employee morale, or you're just not meeting those deadlines. And if you're not meeting them because you're constantly hearing, we can't, we can't, we can't, but you know, all of the tools exist, but for whatever reason, you're not meeting those deadlines. And honestly, even the private equity board members, because they typically have a portfolio of companies they're trying to sell. And they're trying to get them in a particular position so they can do just that. And so, you know, even those guys, I can definitely help them all. My website, just like the company name, Transform the Gap. That's GAAP, transformthegap.com. And I have a couple of different complementary consultations that we can do just to see if we're a good fit for each other, because it's about helping each other, right? And so I have one that's called Help Me Help You, and that's more for the everyday accountant. That's just, you know, they're trying to figure out what their next step is. They want to grow within the accounting world. But then I also have Pathway to Team Efficiency, and these are both complementary consultations. And the Pathway to Team Efficiency is where I'll speak with the accounting team decision makers and talk about where their gaps are, what they need help with, what are the goals they're trying to achieve, and what have you done so far to get there? What have you done and it's just not working? So definitely have those two on my site, you know, Transform the Gap, GAAP.com. And I would love to just have that conversation, honestly, see where I can help.
I love help me help you. Sherrika, I'm going to go a little bit further, and I'm going to say to those PE people, if you're buying these companies, and tell me if I overstep, but if you're buying these companies, you need to assume there's friction. And because that's the thing I've seen, you know, it's kind of like watching two icebergs, you know, like they
Yes.
crash together. And
Yes.
I'm sorry, but the accounting department is what gets crushed on where the two icebergs
Yes.
collide. So I would say anybody who's looking at some sort of transition, you should be proactive. And I'm going to say this because if your job is to buy companies and sell them, or to buy them and you know, improve profitability and make more money for the shareholders, is it safe to say they should be assuming friction and being proactive to make sure that that change is positive, rather than, you know, using the bodies of the accounting department to pave over those bodies and go, yeah, nothing happened here, nothing to see?
I 100% agree. There's definitely going to be an adjustment, to say the least. And another quick story. I went through a reverse merger. And so in a reverse merger, I was with a large private company, and we purchased a smaller public company. And so it was in our attempt to go public quickly. And so we took their name, we took their public status, but it was the private company's books that continued, were the books of record. And so there was this tension, honestly, between the teams, because it was like, well, we bought you. No, we bought you, you know, well, this is how we do things, and this is how we do things. And the way that the environment between the two companies was completely, the corporate culture was completely different between the two. So like all of the people from our private company, we would come in early, you know, if we need to stay late, fine, but we were generally in by 9. We would see all of them coming in at like 11 o'clock, like by 9:30. We were like, where is everybody? They were coming at 11 because they're used to being told that they had to stay until 9 and 10 o'clock at night with their other company. And so we had to kind of get rid of some different mindsets and kind of merge the culture. And it definitely took some adjustment, definitely. So yes, you should expect that there will be some sort of tension, some sort of adjustment, because ideally you're going to have the same roles in two separate companies. And if you don't know, even if you made the decision before the transaction of who you'll keep, there will be friends of those employees who will come in and say, well, this person would have done it better. So you definitely need to start working on mending those relationships so that you can meet your goals. Because some people won't do it just because they don't want to. They're upset, they're unhappy, and you don't want that. You want the company continue to flourish, to continue to grow. So yeah.
And to that point, I've stepped into roles where the people I stepped in as the leader, they actively tried to sabotage me because their friend used to sit in my chair, and somehow it's my fault that that person was let go or transferred. And
Yeah.
it was like, I don't know what the story is, so even me stepping into roles, I always came in with the approach of, hey, everybody, I know you're going to have some questions. I know there's going to be some tension. Well, let's all row together because, if we can get this boat turned, number one, it looks good on a resume if you need to move on. But
Yeah.
number two, who wants to work in a hostile environment? So let's figure out how to get along.
Right.
All right. Well, for the record, I could talk to Sherrika all day long. I won't keep you that long, but you are the expert at you. Is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't yet?
Oh, wow. Great question. So the expert at me, I like the fact that you said that. I honestly, one of the main things, and you did ask this, but I just want to go back over it a little bit. Why would you need me? Why would you need my services? You know, you may be meeting those organizational deadlines. And congratulations, because that's a big, a big accomplishment if you are. But do you know your team? Is your team really getting along? Because oftentimes, too, as the decision maker within the team, you're not really dealing with the team on a day to day. And so do those temperature checks. Have you done the temperature checks to see, how things are going? Or is it, well, things are being done, so I assume everyone is happy? If that's the case, they're probably not, and you need my help because everyone wants to be heard. It's the accounting team. They see where the money goes. And so think about how they feel budget time each year when they're seeing the accounting budget stay the same or even decrease, but we're seeing, marketing go up. Oh, IT development has all of these things that, big things that are happening. Sales, all these new revised commission plans that we have to manage. And, no love to the accounting team. So even if you think you don't need it, if you're in that specifically private equity or privately held, and you're looking to make an organizational change or recently had an organizational change, let's have a conversation. Definitely.
I love that because I think one of the things I always felt like the accounting department was, sort of the clearance warehouse. We always got the old desks, the old computers, and it's like literally these people keep the blood flowing. Like we're as important to the organism that is an organization as the heart is. We're the ones pumping and telling the blood where to go, and yet it's like, I used to get chairs and I'd be like, who sat on this? Like what happened to this chair? Why was somebody so angry with this chair that I get the pieces of it, and maintenance comes around and says, here's the duct tape, you can tape it back together. I used to get keyboards that I don't even know what was on them. It was like somebody spilled. And it's like, give a little love to your accounting department because these are the people that are going to find ways to save you money. They're going to find new revenue streams.
Yes.
They're going to identify the problems before you even have a dream that they're happening. So let's share the love for accounts. Is that fair, Sherrika?
That is fair. Absolutely. More than fair. I agree 110%. And that's so crazy that we have the same the same situations, which goes to show it's not just me, it's not just you.
Yeah. For the record, my first day on any new job, always took cleaning products because I knew I was going to get stuck in a dirty office. Like I love Lysol wipes because I'm like, now I could do it and I don't look like a weirdo. But back then, you had to pull out all your stuff. And
Yes. Oh my gosh, we are kindred spirits. Yes.
I'm just gonna say, if you don't want to touch it, I promise your accounting department doesn't want to either. So
Right.
clean
Right.
desks, new computers. Let's just be nice. All right, Sherrika, I could talk to you all day. Thank you very much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I greatly appreciate it and I adored the conversation. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to our show. We hope that you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to either click the link below or scan the QR code to register and listen to other episodes of our podcast. Or if you think your business or you would be a great guest to be on our show, we're always looking for experts in one of the 9 elements of holistic wellness. We'd love to have you. You can either click the link below or you can scan the QR code and complete our speaker intake form. Thank you, and to your wellness.